There we go. That must have been Nancy. Thank you. Okay. So I'd like to welcome Larry and Melissa from Larry's team. Larry is an award-winning entrepreneur, CEO, and I never say this right because it's a tongue twister, hotelier, right?
Wow, perfect.
He is the #1 best-selling author of Victory 7, Revolutionary Strategies for Entrepreneurs, and a former member of the U.S. Green Berets. Larry's awards include Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, NaVOBA's Vetrepreneur of the Year, and Passkeys Foundation's National Business Leader of Integrity. His appearances include interviews and discussions on every major television and cable network. CBS News has called Larry the nation's foremost expert on leadership and entrepreneurship. It is Monday.
It's a tongue twister.
Yes. So please welcome Larry Broughton, everybody. And thank you for taking the time out to join us today.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Hey, Mimi, thank you so much. It was great to see you. And was it San Diego where we saw each other recently?
Yes.
Great to see
VIB.
you. There you go, at that event. Hey, folks, it's good to see you. Do me a favor. You don't have to do this, but it would help me out if you could. If you can come on camera, that is helpful. So why the heck is that helpful? If you've ever done one of these, there you go. If you've ever done any of these online trainings, it's much easier if I can see whether I'm actually getting your attention. If you're falling asleep, I need to know that I need to change the topic, pick up the pace or something. Or if it's like you're deer in the headlights, I know that I need to slow down and take a little bit more time to go into detail on whatever it is I'm talking about. It's good to see you folks. It warms it up just by having a few faces on here. Additionally, I just want to give this caveat. I know, Melissa, we were doing one of these recently, and it's like somebody in a hospital. If you're in the hospital bed, you don't need to do that, okay? You don't need to turn this on. Or, if you're just a mess or you got a cold, I get it, okay? So I'm glad that you folks are on here. I'm going to share my screen here, and if you guys can give me a thumbs up once you see that. But before I do it, Melissa is going to put a link in the chat box that says action guide on it, okay? And so you can click on that, and if you want to take notes on some kind of, there's 2 or 3 pages there you can just kind of fill in as we go along, or just pull out your notebook and take notes as we go along, okay? But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get started here. The idea is that we are going to talk, or I'm going to kind of pontificate here for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to take some questions, okay? Does that sound like a deal? We are going to have a Q&A at the end, so we're going to talk today about how to negotiate to get exactly what you want, all right? So do me a favor, in the chat, when you think about negotiations, what comes to mind for you? A lot of people get anxious when they think about negotiating. They hate negotiating. So in the chat, go ahead and tell me what comes to mind for you when we talk about negotiations. Now, Mimi had given a little bit of an intro here, but I want to give you a little bit more background. I am the classic mistake maker. I make mistakes all the time. I came from very humble, and I mean very humble beginnings. I grew up in very rural New York. My father was a factory worker, 5 kids. The guy ever made was $18,200 in a year. But even back then, as the dyslexic kid who barely graduated high school, I was able to connect the dots, right? And I remember the first time hearing the term lifelong learner. I said, that's me, right? I love learning. I love taking ideas, aggregating them together, and then I was probably a teacher in a past life, okay? But as Mimi had said, I did spend about 9 years in the Army. About 8 of those were on Special Forces A teams. And I've done a lot of training, teaching, writing on leadership and entrepreneurship topics, okay? The thing I'm most proud of, though, is that I'm a dad. It's nothing like it for me in my life, okay? But I want to let you know you're in the right place. I get, folks, life happens. There's people probably who signed up for this that aren't here. That's fine too, right? We're recording the darn thing. But if you're here, there's a reason why you're here. We've all got distractions, right? There may be just a nugget or two in this presentation that's going to have some value for you, but I'm going to encourage you. I know that you're all busy. If, however, your negotiation skills are flawless, or you've never overpaid for anything, or you've seen every movie and eaten at every restaurant that you've wanted to every time, no matter what, feel free to drop off. All right. But if that's not your bag, then stick around for a little bit, right? If you're in any kind of a relationship, professional or personal, you're negotiating every day. You're negotiating, right? And there are costs to negotiations, right? So we're here today to really talk about how to negotiate to get exactly what you want. Hey, Melissa, there's people trying to get into the waiting room. The funny thing is that truly most of us, particularly Westerners, specifically North Americans, hate negotiations because it feels too much like confrontation or conflict. But when you think about it, our days are just filled with negotiations, right? Maybe it's dealing with employee compensation at work, whether you're looking to buy a new house or a new home, or to pick up a piece of real estate that you want to buy, or to buy a new car, or you want to buy a new business. Some of us have to deal with unions, and we have to negotiate collective bargaining agreements that are worth millions of dollars over the term of the agreement. Or maybe you just want to lower your phone bill. We're negotiating. Maybe you want to secure a new vendor for some service or product for your business or for your life. We are always negotiating. Every day we're negotiating. So I feel blessed that at this point in my career, I'm probably going to age myself here, between real estate deals, between all those areas that I just listed a minute ago, I've negotiated hundreds of millions of dollars worth of agreements, contracts, deals from $10 to tens of millions of dollars over the years. What I've found is that the key goal to any effective negotiation is to get what you need and what you want, while at the same time maintaining some level of integrity. And then this is the key, not neglecting the needs of the other party. That's one of the keys here to success. We're going to go deeper into this in a second. Now, these things don't happen unless we're very intentional about adhering to some of the tips I'm going to be sharing with you today. So if you're trying to grow your business, or you're trying to grow your sphere of influence, which is just as important, there's going to be some negotiations along the way. Whether you're negotiating with a media outlet to get more exposure, or you're trying to hire an experienced key team member or key player for your organization, believe me, you're going to be negotiating. For most of us, just the thought of negotiations gives us the shakes. So we get nervous. It conjures up visions like these sharks circling, right? And since anxiety and emotions left unchecked can feel like shark-infested waters, or to use another metaphor, the anxiety can feel like a runaway train. That anxiety can lead to really bad results when you're at the negotiating table. I've had it happen, and it's been very costly. So I'm going to offer you 15 quick tips on how to negotiate like a rock star. For many of us, the term negotiation sounds like this, right? It's big, and it's a big, daunting term. So let's start with this. For many of us, the thought of negotiations is yelling, conflict, painful conversations, arguments, point, counterpoint. You turn on the TV on any news channel, and that's what it seems like nowadays, right? People are hammering each other over the heads trying to make their point. So I want to help us move away from this feeling of conflict. Aristotle has this quote that says, the best tragedies are conflicts between a hero and his destiny. Really, he's talking about this inner struggle that we have. And he goes on in other teachings, and he talks about how conflict delayed is conflict multiplied. And the point here is that conflict is just part of life. And if we just run away from it, things are not going to be working out in our best interest. So I want to remind us that the word negotiation is just a technical term for discussions. It's the technical term for conversations to reach an agreement or an understanding, whether it's for that multi-million dollar deal, or how to get your kids to do their darn homework, which I've had to deal with over my course of my life, or where you're going to dinner. All right. So in the coaching programs that we do, we go into great detail on some of these points, but we don't have that time today. Okay. So we're just going to kind of breeze by these at maybe a 10,000 foot perspective. But I promise you this, if you just apply a handful of these 15 tips I'm going to share with you, your negotiation skills are going to improve by tenfold. It's just that easy. I've seen it too often that people go into negotiations and they've never negotiated before or been thoughtful about their negotiations. So tip one is this: build relationships first. Now, if any of you have ever been to the Middle East or even to parts of Asia, where you're going to buy a bunch of things, you go into a bazaar or into a market, you don't just walk into the shop and with a whole list of things and pick out the items and go pay for them, right? It just doesn't work. That's actually offensive in some cultures. So why is this? Well, the intention here is to build a little bit of a relationship. You walk into some of these places, you're going to start talking about your kids or how's your day? Where are you heading? And at some point, they're going to say, hey, give me your list. They hand the list off, the merchant hands the list off to some other clerk, right? And that stock clerk starts packaging your items up and they hand you back your package. And in the meantime, you've been negotiating what the cost is going to be for this entire list. This is not traditional Western networking. What's traditional networking look like here in the US? You ever been to a networking event? For me, I mean, I see these things, I stand back and watch these things. It's like negotiations gone off the frickin' rails. All we're doing is handing out business cards to people. We're not really building relationships. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to this event and I'm going to collect 50 business cards. Well, then what? Well, you've got to build a relationship, but this is very difficult. If anyone's ever negotiated with the Chinese or with other Asian countries, you sit down at the conference room table and you're talking about all kinds of things other than business. And somehow you realize, oh my gosh, I've been negotiating deal points for this last half hour and didn't even know it. So we have to build relationships. Why? You're probably asking, so why do I need to build relationships? The reason they do this is to build the know, like, and trust factor. All right. Most people understand that it's hard to say no to a person that they know, like, and trust, right? So the idea here is to build a win-win. All right. Number two is this: the time to prepare for a negotiation is not when you sit down at the negotiating table. It's beforehand. So beforehand, depending on how big the deal is that you're negotiating, you're going to want to take some time to write down your goals. What do you want to accomplish here? What do you anticipate is going to happen during these negotiations? Now, many of you folks have been in the military before, so you've probably heard about 5-point contingency plans, right? Which are basically if-then scenarios. So in this case, if they say this, or if they do that, then I'm going to say this, and I'm going to do that. You anticipate the possibilities here. Now, when you go like 5 layers deep on these scenarios, you can really kind of pull out some opportunities to make money, save money, leave some things on the table for the other guy. But it's very important, particularly in big deals, that we anticipate what's going to be happening here. What are you going to do if they say no to one of your deal points? Have you thought that through? We have to go through all this stuff in our head, write it down in a journal, in a notebook, and bring that along with you. Now, I also recommend, particularly on big deals, and I started this early in my career in the entrepreneurial space, is I would do mock negotiations, right? Just get someone on your team or someone else to help you negotiate, all right? To pretend, go through your deal points and have the other person, have the other person be even more difficult than what you expect the opposing side to be, okay? It's like, the harder you train, the better you perform, right? So try mock negotiations. I promise you, it'll go a long way. It's very difficult to imagine what the other team or the other party or the opposition is going to say if you don't have intel on them, though. And so what's intel, Larry? Well, you've got to do your homework. You got to go online. Look at other deals that the people that you're negotiating with may have done in the past, okay? So particularly if it's a business, oftentimes articles are written about deals that have been done, right, in business journals. If you've got a network of people, like I was talking about earlier, building a network, you can ask, Maybe you know someone in your industry and says, hey, I'm negotiating with XYZ company. Have you ever negotiated with them before? How did that go? Right? You have to do some homework on this. Please do not start thinking about this the day before you go into a negotiation. Okay. Tip number 3 is this, and this is a good one. You've got to be willing to walk away. Okay. But you have to go in beforehand knowing what is your bottom line. Okay. That's going to force you to walk away. And oftentimes when you're willing to walk away, it's not just about money. Sometimes you're going to walk away because it's a hit on your integrity, or the terms or conditions are just too bonkers, right? Sometimes it's better to walk away than to get in or to stay in a bad situation that's going to negatively impact you or the deal or even your business. So beforehand, before you go into any of the negotiations, you need to ask yourself, what's my walk away point? And this might just be if you're negotiating new cable service because your cable bills have gone way up. You need to ask yourself, I'm going to call Cox Cable and I'm going to negotiate a new deal. And maybe it's that I'm going to go to satellite if I don't get the deal that I want. Okay. Sometimes it has to do more with values or beliefs or aligned agendas or financial boundaries, particularly if you're dealing with relationships. Okay. Maybe you're in a business where you have to have collective bargaining agreements, or you're a service provider. Okay. Part of, for me personally, is relationships, relationship economy. We're in this relationship economy. People want to know who they're doing business with. So if someone's going to be using derogatory or condescending tones, or they're belittling me, or there's personal attacks, they're trying to make themselves feel big by making me feel small, that's a non-negotiable in my book. Because I don't want to be dealing, if I'm signing a 10-year deal with somebody, I don't want to be dealing with this for 10 years. In fact, I was negotiating with a 10-year management agreement for a large hotel years ago. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And it was going to be worth millions of dollars to our organization. And we had this young business development guy, his name was Steven, that was with me. And he had done most of the negotiations up to this point, and much of it was over video conferencing, and it was over phone calls and through emails. And we'd really nailed most of the deal points down with one of the partners. Now, this partner was not the managing partner, okay? And so we showed up for the final stage to hammer out the final deal points. And this person, the managing member, had not met us yet. We hadn't even communicated with this person yet. But his partner said, hey, this is just kind of formality. You're going to go in, it's going to be a breeze, just identify the start date, and we're ready to go. So we walked in, and this guy was rude right out of the gate, trying to make us feel small, saying things like, I don't even know why you guys are in the running for this deal, or why would we even consider you guys? And he was making fun of and kind of personally attacking this young business development guy. Like, why would we ever listen to somebody like you? And so this went on for about 4 or 5 minutes. And what I tend to say is, if I'm lying, I'm dying. Let lightning come out of the sky and strike me dead right now if what I'm saying is not the truth. At that point, I was just so frustrated with this guy, I just pushed my chair back from the table. And I said, we're done. We're not going to do this. And the guy was stunned. And I said, hey, we've not even met until just a couple of minutes ago, and this is supposed to be the best it's ever going to get. Why would I want to do business with you if you're belittling us already? And so while we were walking to the elevator, Stephen looked at me and he said, geez, man, you didn't even let the ice in the glass melt yet, right? Sometimes it's got to be that quick. You've got to set your boundaries. You've got to understand this. What is your walk away point? I'm not suggesting that my walk-away points are your walk-away points, but for me, treating people with dignity and respect is very important, even during the negotiation process. Okay, make sense? Okay, number 4, we have to obsess about cost. We have to clearly understand the deal points and the financial cost of the services and products that we provide. Okay, or that we're expected to deliver. And if you're not the financial guru of your organization, you need to speak to them about this. What's the price point that you can sell this for? How low can you go? And at what volume can you do this? Okay, that makes sense? You've got to obsess over the numbers. All right. Number 5 out of 15 is to know what both sides want. We have to know how much the cost to procure and to produce and to deliver the product and service, and to know those break-even points, right? But from number 4, we were talking about earlier, it's just these are some of the basics. But we also have to understand what our side, what we want. What is it that we're actually looking for? Okay, that's really important. But it's also important to understand, what's the other side want? What's the opposing side want? What are they looking for? Savvy negotiators know what both sides want. So you're going to ask, how are you going to find out this, Larry? How the heck am I supposed to find out what they want? Well, you can ask. What I found over the years is that most deal points are negotiable, most. But there are some that are absolutely non-negotiable. So you've got to try to understand those. Well, how do you understand those? Well, by asking the other side, right? Coming right out and asking them. This is where this negotiating, networking, what this networking stuff we were talking about earlier is so important. Understand who's in your business, who's in your industry. All right. Instead of just plastering business cards in people's hands, build a relationship so that you can pick up the phone and actually go into some detailed conversation with these folks when it's time to negotiate with someone that they may have negotiated with in the past. Okay. I've seen this done in real estate developments, right? You think the real estate developer has this plan to build a $250 million piece of whatever, you pick the real estate, right? But when you might get some inside news that they really don't want to build it. What they want to do is just get the entitlements and then sell it off. They don't want to build it off. Well, you're going to negotiate differently for something like that, right? So we have to ask ourselves, what do we want and what do they want, right? I've come right out at the negotiating table and said, so what are your non-negotiables? And people are oftentimes taken back by that. And they might ask, why are you jumping the tracks already on this? And I usually just tell them, well, because I'm not here to destroy you. And frankly, I don't want to be destroyed either, but I do want to find a win-win for us. And so the idea here is, if I know what is a non-negotiable for you, we can either slow this whole process down or speed it up and just say, hey, this isn't going to work. Okay. All right. So tip number 6 is zip it. This is very hard for a lot of people. All right. We need to know when to just shut up when it comes to negotiation. Okay. The challenge is this, though. I understand this. Oftentimes we get nervous. We're afraid we're going to trip over our tongue because we don't know what to say. We're afraid that I'm going to come up with the wrong deal point. There's a saying in the military that you've probably heard: loose lips sink ships, right? The ship in this case is the business deal. And we're afraid that I'm going to, maybe not say the right thing. And so it's very interesting. People just start rambling, right? And so they want to fill dead space, and feeling awkward, is uncomfortable for us. So what we need to do is just breathe, take a deep breath, find your quiet space, and let the silence be your friend. Sometimes this gets really uncomfortable for both sides, and somebody just starts rambling. I've seen this. And so when your deal points are rejected, or they object to them, or you don't have an immediate response, just let it sink in for a minute. Let them say their point or the counterpoint, and just, all right, let me think about this for a second. Gather your wits. There is nothing wrong with this. Unfortunately, I've had to be in court quite a bit recently for some depositions, and I've tried to practice this more. There's a pause, and my attorney has pounded this in my head, that you don't need to answer the question right away. Like when you're having a conversation with somebody, it's weird if you're having a conversation and you just pause. I've got a business partner, frankly, who does this. Melissa has seen this oftentimes. We'll be having a conversation and I'll say something, and it's like dead silence. And I have to sometimes say, hey, Dave, did you catch that? And he goes, oh, I'm just letting it sink in for a minute. During a conversation, it's weird, but in negotiations, it's expected. And you can even say, hey, let me think about it for a minute, and you're going to be fine. All right. So when you start just rambling, though, the risk is that you're giving away information that you don't necessarily want to be sharing with people. Okay. Number 7. We're almost halfway there. Speed kills. Think about this. Think about negotiations as a courting process, like a romantic courting process. Don't jump into bed right away. All right. Let some time go by during the negotiation process. Some deals, some large deals in particular, will take months to negotiate. Some of the really big deals have so many deal points that you've got to say, hey, I need to run this by my team. I have to think about this, right? Don't rush it. Slow things down. The time that the more time we invest, the less time the less likely it is that people are just going to walk away, because right, our time is worth money. So if you're investing time in this, you slow the negotiations down to say, hey, we need to come back. We have to circle back on this thing. The less likely they're going to walk away. Okay. Number 8, offer an out. Sometimes I've been in negotiations where I feel like this guy who's being like backed up off the cliff. Have you ever tried to or seen an animal get cornered in a room or in a cage? What do? They lash out, right? They get angry with you. Offer an out. All right. Particularly in some cultures, it's called saving face, right? You don't crush the competition. Okay. Number 9, I love this one. Negotiate without full authority. Even if you are the business owner, even if you are the CEO, you can negotiate. You can at least tell the other side that you don't have the final say in this. Well, they might say, well, but you're the business owner, and say, well, I've got to go back to my board. I've got to go to my board of advisors. I've got to go to my mentor, right? There's always someone that you can say, these terms sound really good to me. I think we're getting close, but let me run this by my board. Okay. And we'll get back to you within blank number of days or hours or whatever it is. Negotiating without full authority, again, it slows the process down. You can think about it. You can get with your CFO or whoever the key players are on your side and kind of hash this out. Like, is this really the best deal? Am I missing anything on this? And if there is, then you can always go back and say, hey, I spoke to my board, I spoke to our CFO, and we're going to have to tweak this just a little bit more before it's acceptable for us. Okay. So that's number 9. I love negotiating without full authority. Number 10, optimism. It really does matter. Okay. The truth is that optimism breeds confidence. It's confidence, not cockiness, that matters in negotiations. When we expect great things to happen, great things usually happen, even in negotiations. All right. This is a really important one. All right. And so I see this regularly. All right. And then number 11, avoid offering starting points. Okay. This is what really crushes a lot of negotiations. Let's say that you're negotiating, I don't know, pick something. You've probably heard this before. You might say, hey, what's it cost to renovate my house? Or that's not a good one. What's it going to cost to put a new roof on my house? And they may say, well, it can range between $5,000 and $50,000, depending on how big the house is, or depending on what we find up there. Where did your mind immediately go? It goes to what's called the price anchor, the low number. Okay. That low number is setting a price anchor so that anything above that feels like I'm getting ripped off. Avoid that. If someone says to you, what's this going to cost me? Then what you can say is, well, it could be anything up to, it could be $89,000. If you want to, as I understand from our conversation, you're looking for X, Y, and Z. In order for me to provide X, Y, and Z in a timely fashion, it could be up to this point. All right. Does that make sense? But the price anchor ends up pulling the price down in any of the negotiations. Number 12, don't fear the trade back. What the heck is a trade back? Well, imagine you are negotiating on a home, and this can be for anything. This can be in union negotiations when you're doing a collective bargaining agreement. But imagine what most of us have done. If you've not purchased your own home, you know enough people who have. You know what the process is. So let's say you're going to buy a home for $200,000, or it's listed for $200,000, but you don't want to pay $200,000. You want to offer $180,000. Okay, and they come back and they say, sorry, the lowest we can go is $192,000. You say, well, I'll go up to $192,000, but you need to throw in all of the appliances. Okay, so that's the trade back. You're going to give something to me, and I'm going to give something back and forth. Okay, that makes sense? Don't fear it. Some people don't want to do that. And so you can do this with different deal points. Okay. One of the things that I do when I'm negotiating, I've said the word collective bargaining agreements a couple of times, is we've gone in. So a collective bargaining agreement is a union agreement, right? And it has everything to do with what the hourly rate's going to be, what the annual raises are going to be, if there are going to be. It might be cross utilization of team members, that if you got one person who works in this department, they can only work in this department for so many hours. There's 100 different deal points in this thing. And so instead of going point by point and saying, hey, we're going to nail this down, I go through and get all of their objections first, or all of their desires first, and then go back. Okay. If I negotiate point by point, I'm not going to know what the trade back that I could offer if it's down the list, if it's point number 57 on this. Okay. So what I may end up doing is trading smaller deal points in order to get concession on a really important one that I've got. So don't fear trade backs. Use a grain of salt. I think most of us know what this means, right? Using a grain. What I mean here is, you got to remember that the people you're negotiating with might not always be 100% truthful about what it is that they need, or what the cost is, or how important this is. Okay. So you have to trust but verify, I guess, was the common phrase that came up during the Reagan administration, right? When he was negotiating with Gorbachev, right? Trust but verify. Now, how are you going to verify, Larry? Again, I go back to the whole networking thing, building the relationship. Okay. Next thing is we got a Q&A coming up here in just a couple of minutes here. All right. Get it all out. All right. This was when I was referring to this collective bargaining agreement earlier. I said, okay, give me all of your deal points. What do you really want from this? And I try to get this out as soon as possible in the negotiations, so I can find out, are you hiding something? What I don't want to do is at the 11th hour, and I say this, I come right out and say it, because I'm trying to set the expectations here. I'm trying to set boundaries when I'm negotiating. What I was saying, the guy who was I had to negotiate with several times, who lived in San Francisco, and I had a hotel company up there. And I would say to him, Mike, what I don't want is the 11th hour for some big deal point to come out of the sky, right? That then we've got to negotiate. Tell me all of the concerns that you've got right now. What are we really hoping to get out of this, so that we can kind of have this a smooth transition. And I can tell you this, this guy was negotiating, well, I'll just tell you, it was for local too. It was a union up there. And he told me several times over the years that he really appreciated that approach, because oftentimes what happens in negotiations is this tit for tat kind of thing, right? So he kind of snuck this in, and so now I'm going to sneak this kind of thing in, and you lose trust. Remember, the hope here is that both parties feel like they're coming away with a victory on this, okay? And if you can't build a know, like, and trust factor, what's going to happen later on? Even if the deal gets signed, there's going to be a level of distrust, and that is no way to build a relationship. So just tell them, hey, I'm going to give you all of my deal points right now. I need yours back. Okay. And this is how you build lasting relationships, which is point number 15. All right. Think about most things that you're negotiating in business. You negotiate the first term, that term expires, whether it's for a service contract, a vendor, whatever it is, and then you've got to go back and renegotiate it, right? So if you've blown the trust factor because point or tip number 14 went off the rails, it's going to be much more difficult to negotiate that second renewal of the agreement, right? So really work, and this circles right back to tip number 1 about building relationships. Okay, build the know, like, and trust factor. These things don't need to be contentious. Okay, now they oftentimes do get contentious, and this is where the thing about speed kills. Slow the process down sometimes to let the temperature in the room drop, but they don't need to be. Okay, so that's building lasting relationships. Okay, so we hit 11:39 here on the West Coast, and I'm going to stop my screen, and I'm going to take questions if anybody's got questions on any of these deal points right now. So here we go. Floor is open for questions. I saw a guy, a buddy of mine, Kelly Cardenas, did a video the other day online about negotiating one-on-one, negotiations 101, kind of like in college or university. And he was talking about, and it was a good point, to always leave something on the table, right? Don't make the competition, don't make the opposition, don't make the opposing counsel, don't make the other party feel like they got absolutely crushed in this. They don't feel good about themselves. They don't feel good about you on the other side of this thing. So if you leave something on the table, quote unquote, then they kind of feel good as well. So with that said, if anyone's got questions, I'm here. Be glad to answer any questions. We've got about 20 minutes for that. And hopefully you got something out of those 15 quick points.
Thank you, Larry. I loved it.
Good, good.
Being the negotiator here for our corporate allies at NaVOBA, I really enjoyed those points. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Don't be shy. Negotiations win-win.
Questions?
Yeah.
Awesome presentation.
Good, good. And we've got this recorded. So if anybody wants that, you're welcome to reach out at any time. And we can kind of go through it. Excellent points. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Tatiana. You can, if you want, let's say that you're not on screen, you don't want to come on screen, you can type your question into the chat. I should have said that earlier. In fact, Mimi, you had suggested that. Let me go through the chat. Did anybody? No one even wrote questions in the chat. Okay. So as I'd mentioned earlier, so I'm in addition to all the businesses that I'm involved with, I also do coaching and mentoring for entrepreneurs, leaders, and high achievers. And we do go into some really great detail on these points. But if you just take 5 of these points and say, I'm going to keep in mind that the next time I'm negotiating, I'm not negotiating with full authority. If you've ever been a car salesperson or you've gone onto a car lot to buy a car, you oftentimes see that these, a friend of mine was the #1 Lexus salesperson in North America for years. She worked here in Newport Beach, and she said that she really did not like it if someone was married that they came onto the lot without their significant other or their spouse, because they knew that that very likely that decision was not going to be made that day. But she was pretty convinced if a couple came onto the lot, she was going to sell that car that day. She was going to be able to close it immediately. So that's a tip, right? So are there 3, 4, 5 tips that you can kind of apply to whatever it is? I know that all 15 of these tips, and there's, believe me, we could probably come up with 15 more if we put our heads together as a group, right? But if you were to take a few of these and apply them to your next negotiations, I promise you, you're going to see some improvement. Okay. Have you found a difference? This is from Somalia. Is that how you say that? Have you found a difference when negotiating with one gender as against the other gender? Well, I personally have not. Most of the women that I've negotiated, quote unquote, against are very tough, and oftentimes they're attorneys for whatever reason. But studies have actually shown this. In fact, I was watching a video the other day. Who the hell was it? It was with Nora Vincent. She did a very interesting unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she did, you can go look her up online. I don't want to get into the major topic that she was doing a video on, but what she found, well, I'll just tell you, it's a woman who was disguised as a man for almost 2 years, for 18 months. Okay. And she was really feeling like, I want to figure out like what's going on in men's minds. And so she disguised herself as a man. She's 5'11", athletic. She passed, you know, as a guy. And she found that when she went to negotiate a car as a male, then men just got to the facts, to the points immediately. When she went to negotiate, she went to the same car dealership. When she walked in as a female, you know, wearing the dress and looking effeminate, then the salesperson, as respectful, she said even more respectful than with the guy, but that it was more about emotions. He was really trying to sell her the features of the car last, but the benefits first. Does that make sense? He was selling the benefits first, the features afterwards. When it was man to man, it was just none of the emotion, just here's the fact, 8-cylinder, this many horsepower, blah, blah, blah. I would imagine there is some of it. Over the years, I used to have a vice president of people services in our organization. It's a woman. And if we were negotiating union contracts, then it would oftentimes be her and I, or her and our chief operating officer, who was a male. So both were going in. Okay. That way we just felt like we had an edge by doing that. But yes, I'm sure there are some differences when negotiating opposite genders. But I think it has more to do with men tend to be more logical, and women, I think you're gonna have to appeal to the emotional side a lot more. The guy named, the big marketing guy, big old mustache. What is his name? Dan Kennedy. Dan Kennedy says that all decisions are emotional decisions, right? All decisions are emotional decisions. So there's that to take into account too. I hope that answered your question. All right, Mark, if you ever have a chance to do a training or personally profiling in sales, it would be very beneficial for many. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Where a lot of this comes in, Mark, is, as you know, Mimi had mentioned, I'm in the hotel business as well. And so we do have hotel salespeople who are out there every day doing this. But I think, Mark, it'd be interesting. What do you think are the most important parts that would help? But I think you're right. Personality profiling is really important. And there's a bunch of those out there, whether it's the Clifton Strength Finders or DISC or Myers-Briggs. Are there some, Mark, that you have seen that you think are most effective when it comes to personality profiling? And while he's putting that in there, if he is, any other questions or comments? Myers-Briggs, yeah. But the funny thing is, you really need to understand yourself, but you also need to understand what are the other strengths. Like if you just know your own, but you don't know what the other possibilities are, it's really not that helpful. So it does take an investment of time and energy. But if your job, if your career is based on sales, it's worth the investment for sure. For sure. Any other comments or questions? Thanks, Mark. Mark, by the way, do you know what your Myers-Briggs is? Anybody else
Mark,
know what your
feel free to unmute. You can feel free to unmute and talk directly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm a little under the weather, so that's why I'm not on camera. I was a VP of sales. I thought your presentation was excellent, Larry.
Good, thanks, Mark.
And business owners by nature get into business because they're really good at something. All of a sudden, they have to be a salesperson.
Yeah.
And I thought what you said is 100% spot on. And I think what happens is when a business owner gets an appointment, they don't want to lose the appointment because the appointment's the hardest thing to get.
Yes.
And then they kind of, because they got the appointment and want the sale, they give up their integrity of a business owner because they want the sale. So I thought you were spot on with what you said. The power of negotiation is the willingness to walk away.
Yeah. Mark, what's your
It's-
Myers-Briggs score? Do you know? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I'm a dominant driver, and that's why I brought up personality profiling, because
Yeah.
as a dominant driver, you meet a dominant driver, somebody has to dial down their personality in the negotiation.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And people that are high in command on the Clifton Strength Finders is the same thing. They can sometimes be perceived as prickly, right? But they just want to get to the facts. So in Myers-Briggs, I'm a ENFP. I think that personality profiling is so important. I don't know if you can see this on my phone. Outside each of our office doors at the office, everyone in our home office would have a variety of different personality scores, including Colby, Myers-Briggs. For me, I had Colby, Myers-Briggs, love languages, Clifton Strengths, and the octagram. So that we knew when you're walking in to this office, you know how the person is built, right? So that's Mark, that's a great point. Thank you. And Melissa's a ENFJ. Yes. She's a super high empath as well. So nodding her head. Yeah.
I think the
boo-hoo.
other thing is the disc profile, which also is excellent.
Yes, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I should put my score on there too. All right. Other comments or questions? Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Other comments, questions, concerns? Okay. Well, there you have it.
Thank you, Larry.
You're
and
welcome,
Melissa,
Mimi. Thanks for
joining
having
us.
us. Yeah.
And anybody that will be tomorrow in Los Angeles with our team,
Oh,
you
that's
can meet
right.
Larry in person.
I forgot about that. Thank you for the reminder, Mimi.
Of course.
Yes, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, so I'll be there for that. Really reach out if you've got any questions. I know that this was super fast. We could spend an hour on each of these topics, right? But obviously we don't have time for that. Okay. But reach out if I can ever do anything for you. All right. Mimi, thank you. It's an honor connecting with you again. And
Yes,
you know that
thank
I
you.
have a very fond heart for NaVOBA. I've been involved with you
I
guys
know,
for
thank
a
you.
long time. So thank you. All right.
We appreciate you.
Thanks.
And I just want to thank everybody for joining. And we will be posting this recording on the NaVOBA YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get any additional information, Larry's information will be there, or you can message us at marketing@navoba.org if you would like to get a personal recording. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy your free 9 minutes.
There you go. All right. Thanks, everybody. Go
Have
get
a
them.
great day.
God bless.
Thanks.
Bye.